how to streamline business processes with SOPs. Your team is not necessarily failing. It could be that your processes are held captive behind the bars and SOPs can set those free. It's really hard to hold somebody accountable to a process that lives in your head. By the end of this video, you're going to learn how to build an SOP in a modern way that your team will be able to replicate and you can scale. So we have the privilege of working with a lot of contractor owners, and when we start to meet with them, we're like, hey, how do you do estimating? So they'll tell us, and then we'll go, how do you do payroll? How do you do job costing? How do you do all these other things? And they'll start to tell us. And then we'll ask this simple question, can you show us all that? They're like, well, I don't have it written down. Well, that is a captive process. What do I mean by that? Captive process actually sounds like a positive thing. It's not. It's a process that is held captive behind the bars of your own head. And what we've got to do is be able to free that to get that out. Too many times business owners have these processes in their head. So we were working with a business owner, and we've done this a number of times, where he finally bought in. He was like, all right, I'm going to document some of this stuff. So he started to document it. He hired a new person. He trained them on what he documented. He did it over and over and over again. And guess what? He doesn't answer any questions from that guy anymore, because that guy not only knows how to do what the owner wanted him to do, the person he hired is actually building on his own training. And now that person is doing those tasks at about 120% efficiency of what the owner actually did. He's actually doing it better than. I know that's tough on the ego sometimes, but if you're willing to be able to let some of those things go, I promise it'll be a great value to you, and you'll stop living in the chaos that you feel right now. So there's a 3-letter acronym I want you to think of when we're talking about streamlining with SOPs. You ready? It's MDT. M as in Mary, D as in doctor, T as in team, but they don't mean those things. So let's go to MDT. What does that mean? They really mean map, document, and train. So a lot of times, if we train at all, we'll move straight to the training side of it without the documentation. Sometimes we'll document without the mapping, where we'll just see a process and go document it. Listen, I would rather you do that even if you don't have the map, but in an ideal world, what we want to do if we want to deploy SOPs in our business is we need to follow that MDT acronym. We want to map first, document second, and then train with repetition, predictability, and meaning on the back end. So how do we do that? Well, I want to give you a broad picture of a business first, because if we understand how a business is built, then we can really start to understand that idea of mapping, documenting, and training. So every business, I want you to think of like the human body. It's like a skeleton, or the framing structure of a home. So before you see the sheetrock, before you see the paint, the colors, the textures, the carpet, everything else, what's underneath is a foundation. And so in every business, we believe a business is built on 4 foundational cornerstones. I just held up 3, but I really meant 4. So 4 foundational cornerstones: purpose, people, process, and profit. So purpose, things like vision, mission, values, culture. Those are all things that actually need to be documented. People, those are things like org charts, job roles, hiring processes. There's process, I'll come back to that, and then there's profit. Subdivided cash accounts, dashboards, pro formas, budgets. All of those that I've just mentioned are tools to run the business. We have identified about 28, 29, 30 of those. In fact, it's a good time to highlight, I have actually built a masterclass on how to run a construction business. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, Scott, I'm not saying I don't know how to run a construction business. I've been doing it for 5 or 25 or whatever years. No, that's not the point. It's a lot of times it's really good just to go back and see construction businesses from a fresh perspective. And you'll see this video is not just a simple 10-minute video. This is a long video of me deep diving in to the back end of a construction company so you can see truly how one is run. I promise you'll pick up at least one pearl, as long as you'll give devoted, undivided attention to that. So go click on the link in the description below, and you'll see that great video where I dive into all of this in great detail. So we've got those 4 foundational cornerstones: purpose, people, process, and profit. I told you I'd come back to process because that leads to our second major tool within a business, and that is what we call the master process roadmap. And so the master process roadmap is in that process vertical of the 4 foundational cornerstones, but it's made up, instead of the 4 Ps, of what we call the 4 core: marketing, sales, operations, and administration. In fact, let's put that in rewind, because we want to go marketing first always, sales, operations, admin, because you can't bill something you've not delivered. You cannot deliver something you've not sold, and you can't sell something if they don't know you exist. So we want to have those in sequential order. Once we understand the systems of a business, marketing, sales, ops, and admin, now what we can do is start to build the standard operating procedures around those processes so that those processes can be done on repeat, because it's repetition, predictability, and meaning which keeps a business alive. It's a great story told about Ernest Shackleton, one of the early explorers down to the Antarctic, 1914, 15, and 16. In fact, it's a great book by Alfred Lansing called the book Endurance, named after the ship. And if you go down, what you find is Ernest Shackleton led an expedition of 28 men total on a 144-foot Endurance ship. They floated all the way from England down near the Antarctic, got stuck in pack ice. They were stuck for about 9 months. The ship ended up cracking and sinking in the middle of the frozen tundra. They lived on lifeboats there for another year, so almost 2 years, fundamentally shipwrecked on a frozen sea, and not one man died. How did that happen? Because of repetition, predictability, and meaning. Ernest Shackleton committed himself to having standard operating procedures on the adventure, even though many times his guys didn't have anything to do. They were just stuck. But he still created a process for his men to be able to follow, because the process is what kept them alive. All right, so I've isolated you into the process vertical. So you just pick a process. So let's pick, for instance, marketing. If you just picked one process within your marketing vertical, what would it be? Go ahead and think of one out loud. I'll give you a hint. How to update your website. That's a marketing process. How to post to social media, marketing process. Let's hop over to the operations and pick one. So if you're in construction, it could be a simple one of how to pull a permit. That's a process. How do you standardize that process so you're not recreating the wheel every time you do it? Let's take the permit process. First, we want to map out those 4 systems of a business, which we already did: marketing, sales, ops, and admin. We isolated ourselves into the operational vertical of those systems. Now we picked one process out of that. That's our how to pull a permit process. And so what we're going to do is the next time we pull a permit, we're just going to record it, how we did it. That's it. And so we call that the systems mindset. What it says is this: the next time you do a thing, capture it, record it like it's the last time you'll ever do the thing. Like this video. Technically, I wouldn't have to do another video on this in the future. Now I do. We give you a lot of videos in this channel. But this, I'm recording this, so technically you could just hit rewind on how to develop an SOP. Now, I also want to bring you into the world of AI automation, super simplistic. So if you've got a favorite AI tool, I do not recommend free tools. I highly recommend going with an AI tool that's vetted and preferably that does not post advertisements within its thing. So I won't mention any. You can go pick your own and do your own research. But here's a simple way to be able to leverage AI to create standard operating procedures. The first thing you can do is you can actually have AI create how you create a standard operating procedure. We call that the process. In other words, in our business, how you create a process is this way. We want every process to start with our mission statement, our core values. We want to have certain steps within the process. We want to name who that process is for, what role, not a person's name. And so you create these instructions, and AI can actually help you do that. Just have it interview. Say, hey, AI, interview me and ask me how to create instructions so that you create a standardized process for me moving forward every time I want to create a process. All right, got it? So we put that into the brain of that AI agent. It's called the instructions. Again, just ask AI how to do it. It'll tell you how to do all this. Now, once you've got the instructions in there, then you go, I want to create a process called how to pull a permit, and say, interview me up to 20 questions on how to do this. And it'll interview you, or you can just upload what you recorded and say, hey, turn this into an SOP for our business. And it's wonderful because it'll actually do it all for you, and it will output it in whatever format you want. Written, it can do audio, it can do a variety of different things. There's great tools out there for that. So let's just say you did a written document on how to pull a permit. Once you have that, we're going to take that document, we're going to link it to our master process roadmap, which is nothing more than a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet with the cells across the top that say marketing, sales, ops, and admin, and then it's got all the processes below it. So you're going to put a block underneath that says how to pull a permit, and then link your process that AI helped you create, or that SOP, on that actual box under your process vertical within operations. And so voila, you actually have a process on how to pull a permit. So how do you train that process? Well, that's the third major tool of every business, what we call the anchor. We used to call it the culture calendar because it's how you build culture, and that culture of repetition within the business. So the anchor is nothing more than a spreadsheet. 52 weeks across the top of the year, all the ingredients you want to embed in the business across the first column vertical of the spreadsheet. So things like, we want to do team meetings every week. We want to do departmental meetings every week, executive meetings every month. We want to do administrative training every week, whatever. Put all of those things down there. And then you take that line, let's call it operations training, and the third week of the year, and we put in there how to pull a permit. So 2 times a year, 5 times a year, you can go back and train on how to pull a permit. Just pull the document up and walk through it. So you've got three major tools of the business. Again, I deep dive on those tools in that How to Run a Construction Company link that's in the description below. So again, make sure you go check that out. But what we'll do is we've got those three major tools: the operating system, the master process roadmap, that's where your four core are. Your operating system is where your four foundational cornerstones are. And then the third part is that anchor. That's how we create the repetition, predictability, and meaning. All that to support your standard operating procedures so you can begin to automate and scale your business. Why? It's because many business owners live in chaos, and we want to liberate you from chaos to make time for the things that matter most.